Hi, my name's Ofori, and I'm a Booktube newbie. So I'm just starting today a channel, Booktube channel. It's called the Digital Reader, and I thought I'd do the Booktube questions since that's a kind of a good way to get started. So, first one, why did you start this channel? A couple weeks ago, I was looking for an e-reader. I was kind of thinking about doing some digital writing and using e-ink. And so I started searching for reviews for digital readers. And in searching for those reviews, what I bumped into was a lot of booktubers. And I just liked the energy. Also, over the years, I have kind of really, I used to be an avid reader, and I just kind of gotten away from reading. Every month I still bought books, but it's no other way to put it, but TV really creeped up and sucked out my book reading time. And I recently retired, and once I retired, it got even worse where basically I was watching a ton of TV and just was buying books but wasn't really reading them. So, watching all these booktubers and watching so many videos where people were getting like their first Kindle, it just really excited me to see their energy, and it tickled me to see them buying their first Kindle, because it seems like a lot of booktubers were kind of like they're physical book people, and getting their first Kindle was really just kind of a shock to their system, where they just always thought that digital reading was just kind of a cheat. But once they kind of got a Kindle and started doing digital reading, it just seemed like it rocked all their worlds. So looking at this and then looking at some of the booktubers, I was just like, it's coming on the new year, and I want to make a New Year's resolution to cut my TV watching time in half and fill that time with catching up on all the books that I've purchased over the years. So I gave myself a goal, and the goal was to read 24 books in 2024. Definitely I can go over if I want, but 24 books in 2024. And when I was making that goal, I also was just like, I'm going to definitely try and clean out some of my library. But, the energy and the love of books that so many of these booktubers, I saw their channels. One of my favorites was Kalila, I think is her name. And I just loved her energy. Her energy just made me feel young again, her love of books. So I figured, heck, I'll do a book channel. One thing I did notice is that a lot of the booktubers weren't really talking about books I read and I loved. They definitely have book recommendations of books that would interested me and I feel would broaden my horizons. But they just weren't talking about the books I was into. That's the first thing. And the second thing is that they just weren't really talking about kind of the digital world of books. Second question, what are some fun and unique things you can bring to YouTube? For me, the biggest thing I think I bring to the world of booktubers is that I don't mess with physical books. I haven't messed with physical books as far as keeping them in my book collection since 2003. When 2003, I bought my first ebook, and when I bought it, I instantly knew it was the future. So from then on, I just buy ebooks. Now, I do buy physical books, but I only buy a physical book if I can't get the ebook. And even with the physical book, what I do is I basically get my X-Acto knife and my scanner, and I basically break the book down, scan it, and then read it. So since 2003, the only books I have permanently had in my library are really three books. I have The Tao of Pooh, The Tale of Piglet, and I have a signed copy of The Stainless Steel Rat by Harry Harrison. Those are the only three physical books I have owned long term since 2003. So I feel like I hopefully can bring some knowledge about, focusing on buying digital books, focusing on legally buying DRM free digital books or digital rights management physical books, bringing information about other sites other than Kindle. I mean, for me, just like everybody else, Kindle is kind of my home base. I look for books on Kindle. I really like the Kindle algorithms as far as recommendations when you're looking at books on their site or you purchase books on their site. I also use the Amazon website is where I have my book wish list. So all the books I want to buy, I store there. But as far as purchasing books, Amazon is like the fourth place I go. So if I can't find it in my other three places, then I go to Amazon and I get it off of Amazon. Of course, I have a Kindle, but hopefully, in talking about my experience with books digitally, I can give y'all some insight about shopping for digital books, about storing digital books, some of the e-readers I've used and my thoughts on those e-readers, and the e-reader that is I use currently and is my favorite e-reader at this point. So hopefully I can bring some of that information and also some of the things that I've read. I am a huge pulp action fan. I love pulp fantasy. I love pulp science fiction. I also love urban fantasy. I love humorous fantasy and science fiction. And my number one love is superhero fiction. When I used to work at the University of Pennsylvania, and of course in Pennsylvania in the United States. And when I worked there, I worked in administration. I worked in human resources. And I would commute to work on the train. And because the University of Pennsylvania is so big in Philadelphia, the area where I live, a good third of the people on that train also worked at the University of Pennsylvania. And when I first started commuting there, I'm a big comic book lover. I used to bring comic books with me. Back then, digital reading wasn't really a thing the way it is now. So I would just bring some comic books in my bag and read them. But when I got to work, I would have meetings with people and I would give trainings and stuff. And to be honest, the people who saw me reading comic books just didn't take me as seriously. So I ran into this Spider-Man book, and it was a Spider-Man book, a fiction book, a written fiction book about Spider-Man. I thoroughly enjoyed it. All the same comic book images were in my mind, and from then on, during my whole career at Penn, when I would commute, I would always have a book with me, and very often it was some type of superhero fiction. Could be traditional heroes, Marvel, DC. More than likely, it was heroes created by some other author that were created just for that fiction. Why do you love reading? That's pretty simple. I love reading because reading, for me, was really the first movies I ever saw that I got to choose. And when I say that, whenever I read a book, I'm reading the book, but all of the images in my mind are kind of like I'm watching a movie. So for me, reading books are kind of just like this incredible movie that you can take anywhere. You can 10 minutes in a doctor's office, on a train, on a plane, sitting on your bed, sitting in a coffee shop. They're just this movie that you can take anywhere, and all the images and everything is just tailored to you because you're making it in your mind based off the description of that author. So I just love reading because of that power it does. I mostly read fiction. I do read, I don't really read that many biographies, but I do listen to a couple biographies on Audible. I don't really count Audible as book reading, and the main reason I don't count it as book reading is I feel when I read books, I like to be totally immersed in the book. And I feel like Audible is a lot like listening to music or watching TV. Very often I find people who are using Audible for books are doing it they have split attention. They listen to Audible while they exercise. They listen to Audible while they drive. They listen to Audible while they clean their house or while they cook. Their attention is split. When I read a book, I just like it to be me and the book, and that's it. I don't even listen. It's hard for me personally to even listen to music when I read. I just like to be in the book. So I really, most of what I talk about and most of what I'm going to be discussing is going to be books that you read, not books you listen to. Although I do have a decent Audible library, but like I said, when I listen to those books, it's usually because I want to listen to something while I'm doing something else and my attention's split. The book or series that got me into reading is pretty easy. I'm an old school person. It was the Narnian Adventures. Back then there wasn't a ton of young adult fiction. When I was young, I mean when I was 7, 8, 9 years old. But my mother was, she wasn't so much an avid reader, but she definitely was a person who was into knowledge and education. And I remember when I guess I was probably about 7 or 8, she gave those books for me to read. Well, really, she gave those books to all. I have a brother and a sister, and all of us have read those books in our formative years. And those books really kind of locked me into fantasy. As I got older and I really went towards my personal taste, like I said, I went more towards pulp. When we were young, there was only one TV in the house, and my father ruled it, and he watched stuff that no young person would be interested in. He watched tons of PBS news and debates and roundtables and all types of news and documentary stuff, which I couldn't be bothered with. So when I was growing up, the library was where I got all my entertainment from, my school library or the library around where I lived. And because of that, I really was weaned on old school pulp fiction. The number one series I remember gaining joy from when I was young was Doc Savage. Oh, I love Doc Savage. And then after Doc Savage, there was Conan the Barbarian. Loved that. And then John Carter, Warlord of Mars. Then the Destroyer series. Those were really the series and books that I read all the time when I was young in my formative years. And those really got me hooked into pulp action reading. Honestly, the genre doesn't matter as much as long as it's action and some intrigue. I'm not a big socio-political environment. I'm not a big, oh my gosh, the world is so intricate that they're building. That's not really my thing. I like action, adventure. As I got older, I enjoyed humorous stuff. Humorous takes on urban fantasy, humorous takes on science fiction. And one of my favorite book series of all time is Harry Harrison's Stainless Steel Rat. I just love that thing, which is why one of my prized possessions is a signed book, by a book signed by him of the first book in the series. Where do I read? I generally kind of am a person who reads in two ways. I kind of read in stolen moments. So because I'm a digital reader, I always have the book I'm reading on me, whether it's on my phone, whether it's on my Kindle, whether it's on my other e-readers. I always have a book with me, able to whip out. So I read a lot in stolen moments. And the other place I read a lot of is in my bed, kind of when I get myself ready to go to sleep. Right before I go to sleep, I'll start reading. And if it's a book I'm not super into, I might read for a half hour, 15 minutes to a half hour, and go to sleep. If it's a book I'm super into, then very often I'll start reading that book and I just lose track of time. 3, 4, 5, 6 hours later, I'm finishing off that book and just having a late night. What kind of books do I like to read? I kind of talked about that, but just briefly. Pulp books, pulp action. I like fantasy, science fiction. I like superhero fiction, but I just basically like books that have action, exciting characters, daring do. I do kind of want to start to broaden my horizons. I wouldn't mind some mysteries, some thrillers, and I wouldn't mind, at least just because they seem so popular, I wouldn't mind giving a romance or two a try. I mean, for me, I've never been very much interested in romance books. My biggest gripe with romance books is kind of, there's not a, I never would have felt that there's a ton of surprise in romance books. I mean, when people meet, however they feel about each other, you know they're going to fall in love. You know, when you're reading the book, you know that the end result is they're going to fall in love. And everything is in aid of that. So it's one of the few book types I would imagine. Once again, I've never read a romance book, but it just feels like a book type where there are no real surprises because the people are going to fall in love. So I don't know. I'm open to that. There was a book that one of the booktubers, a couple booktubers have been talking about, that was a romance that kind of I think I'm going to try, which is called The Song of Achilles. For me, like I said, I don't read book romances, but as far as movies, my top 3 romantic movies are Summersby, Hitch, and Love Actually. Those are my 3 favorite romantic movies. So that kind of lets you know where my tastes run. But man, Summersby, when I first saw Summersby, and I guess probably maybe in my early 30s maybe, but when I first saw Summersby, I just straight up cried. I was crying. That was, such a wonderful movie. There's a scene in it where I can't even say. If you've never seen Summersby with Jodie Foster and Richard Gere, you need to watch it. It is just a wonderful, wonderful romantic movie, and it's just my type of movie. What genres would you like to see talked about more on Booktube? And since I've already talked about some of these questions, let me go ahead and strike through them. Hey, look at that. What genres would you like to see talked about on Booktube? For me, the genres that I like. I don't often see people talking about pulp action books, whether they're fantasy, whether they're science fiction. I generally see, when I'm looking at the fantasy and science fiction booktubers, they're just talking about much deeper fare, much more world-spanning fare, you know, and that's not bad. That's not bad. I mean, Dune is when I read Dune is when I felt like I finally became an adult when it came to science fiction fantasy. That was like my first real adult book. Splinter in a Mind's Eye. That was one of my first big adult books. You know, those kind of books really, I like them, but I don't love them. Those aren't the books I generally gravitate for, and that's what I see a lot of booktubers recommending. For me, I'd like to see more recommendations of pulp fantasy, pulp science fiction, action, daring do, heroes swinging on lines and, you know, fighting off the villains, those kind of things. Obviously, I'd like to see more representation of superhero fiction. I think that that's definitely a slept on genre, especially for people who are comic book fans, but just because of comic books struggles with keeping up with the digital world, maybe just, you know, don't read as many comics as they used to, but still would love to. Those, I think, would be the 3 genres I would like to see talked about the most that aren't really talked about. What challenges do I think I'll face? I think that the biggest challenge that I think I'll face is I'm new to this. This is literally the 2nd video I've ever put on YouTube. First video I put on YouTube was about maybe 2 years ago, and it was basically because, well, not even 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago, but it was basically when Elon Musk bought Twitter. I was just so triggered by how inefficiently he was doing things that I actually did a video on how I thought he could fix what things I thought he could do to fix Twitter. Um, you know, but that was a while ago, and even then I didn't really do a lot of video editing. I used a cartoon making software to do it because I kind of did it as a cartoon, and you know, it was interesting, but you know, after I did it, it just wasn't me. I'm not a terribly political person, so it just wasn't something I really felt like I wanted to continue on, but I kind of got it out of my system. But I think that's going to be big. The other thing is really just kind of, I don't want to say it's a challenge, it'll actually be fun. It's kind of working on improving my initial setup. I mean, right now I'm just doing it. I saw, you know, I've been trying to figure out how to do this in a way that I feel comfortable doing it, that works for me, and I can do it consistently. So I thought about getting a green screen, and I did get a green screen, but when I did it, I just was like, it doesn't work for me. Behind me is kind of like I'm single, but behind me is kind of like my my computer / junk room where I have all my junky tech stuff and everything. So I'm probably just going to do it from here. Hopefully over the next couple of videos I'll clean this area up so it, you know, just looks a little bit more more clean. I also need to improve lighting. I'm going to get some extra lights and put in this room so it'll kind of brighten it up a bit. But like I said, those are things that happen over time. I just wanted to kind of get this out. My main thing for this was to kind of get started in the new year. I wanted to get the first one out in January and try to do, at least for the month of January and the month of February, at least try to, you know, put out something once a week. Behind me, what you see is my digital library. These are all of my books I have digitally, and looking at the number, I see I have about 1,750. Of those 1,750, I have probably read, over the last 20 years, I've probably read like 200 of them. Actually, I can actually real quickly just find out how many I've read. Let's see. Look at that. 238 books. So I've read 238 of these books, but on the whole, this is probably what I'm going to have behind me, and what I'll also probably do when I do my YouTubes is, instead of all of the books, I'll probably just show the books that are in my queue. Not queue. I'm a booktuber now, and I think booktubers use the term TBR. So I will be using the books, I'll be showing the books that are in my TBR behind me, which is my library. So, last question. What advice would I give to a booktuber that has just created their channel? I don't have any advice. This is brand new to me. Hopefully I'll have some comments or some information as to what people are doing, what they're doing to improve, and just recommendations on what I can do to improve. This is the way I've decided to do this. You know, I see a lot of booktubers, like I said, you know, pictures of their homes and stuff like that. This is just how I feel comfortable, mainly since all my books are digital. It just feels more comfortable to me to be able to move around and jump around my computer when I'm pulling up books and showing books and you know, showing my library. And also, hopefully, like I said, I'll be talking about how I acquire books and some of the software and things that I use. So I just felt like this would be the best format for me. So I guess that's it. I'm going to, next step is basically get iMovie, get this ready to go on, and my hope is it is Sunday, January 21st at 7:49 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and I hope to get this posted by Monday morning. Once again, my YouTube channel is The Digital Reader. My name is Ofori, and I guess I'll see you in the next video.